Hello everyone. You join me in my partner's 308 active 1.6 HDI. I thought I'd just go for a drive, tell you what I think about it. I'll start off by saying how I came to find this car. My missus had an old Fiesta. It was only supposed to be a bit of a stopgap kind of car. She had it nearly a year. It'd done its job, but she wanted something a bit more modern. And I was looking at cars that were efficient, cheap to run, reliable, and I come across some Renaults, things like that, and Nissan I like the look of. And then I stumbled across 208s, and then I found the 308s, and the price difference wasn't that big. And I thought, for the kind of class of car you're getting, you might as well pay an extra few hundred quid and get a 308 rather than the 208. So yeah, that's what I did. I could have gone for a slightly higher spec model, but the budget at the time only had around £4,000 to play with, and that got me this red 308 active HDI. It's a pretty basic car, to be honest with you. I mean, there's nothing really super fancy about it, but I will have to say, for what the car is, a lot of people would be completely fine with this kind of car. I mean, it's somewhat quiet, refined, economical. It sips fuel. It's no pay. You don't have to pay for road tax, and it's fairly comfy. Obviously, there are issues with them that you have to look out for, like you do with every single car. But nothing really that much to worry about. Obviously, this being the active trim, you get a few nice touches. You get rear parking sensors, you get auto lights, auto wipers, touchscreen infotainment, and yeah, really, what more else could you really ask for a somewhat basic car? I wouldn't advise getting the basic trim. I think it's called Access. That one you really don't get a lot for your money. You might as well go for the active or above. You also have, I think, the Allure trim. You have a Feline trim, which only lasted around a year. Those come with a bit more. I think they come with LED lights instead of halogens. Maybe front parking sensors. Some of them. You can also spec a panoramic roof, and those do look nicer. They have I think front fog lights, whereas these don't have front fog lights. I think these only have rear fog lights. So yeah, you can go for one of them. I think on the whole, my missus likes it. I think this car did have a slave cylinder replaced, and I'm not entirely sure they bled the clutch. I'm not sure if you have to. They might not have bled it that well, because sometimes it judders a little bit when you're setting off. Even when you're trying to be as smooth as you possibly can. But apart from that, the car's sound. This car has nearly 109,000 miles on, and it feels completely fine. Obviously, you are going to get some rattles, which you might be hearing, because I think they're located somewhat close to the camera. But I haven't got the radio on. If you had the radio on just a little bit, you wouldn't hear them. And yeah, it's just completely fine as a car. I think people often, they think of Peugeots like how they were years and years and years ago, where they have electrical gremlins and stuff like that. But that's just not the case. There's nothing wrong with it. Obviously, some of you might have seen my video on my Mondeo. I'd still rather have my Mondeo. I think it's a class above this. The interior, while it's a bit more dated, it feels nicer to touch. Because that is one thing with these. The interiors, I think, is nicely designed. However, when you actually go around touching stuff, it all kind of feels like really cheap plastic. But if you don't touch anything and you just simply look around you, I think it's quite alright. The thing that will annoy people, like it does with me, is the infotainment, because that controls everything to do with air conditioning and stuff like that. I do believe they should have just put some knobs and dials and buttons for air conditioning and the temperature control, because I do genuinely think it's a hazard. I think unless you've got the screen on the temperature setting the whole time, which is what I do when I drive this car, I think it's a hazard, because your eyes are focused on that for too long. I mean, yes, you would get used to it a little bit, but not enough, I don't think, to be able to like adjust the temperature without looking at it for long periods. So that's one thing I'd say is bad, the infotainment regarding the temperature controls. But that's basically the only one. Rear legroom's not very good in these. For kids and stuff, it'll be fine. For adults, you know, if you're like me with my driving position, and I'm only 5'11" or 5'10", you can't really be comfortable behind me. But the trade-off for that is that the boot is one of the biggest in its classes. The boot's, I think, slightly bigger than a Ford Focus, but the Ford Focus has slightly better legroom. But overall, the car is slightly smaller than a Ford Focus, because this adopted Peugeot's new design. I forgot what they call the design language, but I think it only weighs 1,200 kilograms, 1,250, something like that, and that's, for a car this size, that's not a lot of weight. And you might be looking at it thinking, oh, the 1.6 HDI, it's only got 90 horsepower. Yeah, that's right, it's only got 90 horsepower. But because the car's so light, it feels completely fine. In fact, when I'm driving this, I always feel like I'm on an eco mission, because you check the trip computer, and it's always my missus hasn't reset the trip computer since she had it at the start of the year, and she's done 2,354 miles. A lot of that isn't motorway driving, it's going to work and back, and that's 54.2 miles to the gallon, over 2,000 something miles. I've driven this car of an evening in the city and I've got 65 miles to the gallon, driving carefully. I went to the Peak District in it from Birmingham, about an hour and 20 minutes. I got 70 to the gallon when I was going there. And I drove around there, and obviously it's all hilly around there, and a lot of first gear, going up hills. And I came back and I averaged 64. I put 25 quid in the tank before I went, and I'd done over 200 miles, and I came back with more fuel before I started. My car, my Mondeo, never would have got close to that. Like this thing, it sips fuel. You know, I see people on the, I think it's Honest John website, and they input the real MPG figures, and people say they're averaging around 50 something in these. I don't know how, because, you know, I could be quite a heavy-footed driver, and I can easily get 60 to the gallon out of this. I think it's just incredible in terms of a low-cost car, which I think looks alright, drives alright, somewhat comfortable, refined. I think the stereo is a bit crap as well. I mean, it gets a bit distorted at higher volumes, and it's not very loud, and there's not a lot of bass. But a lot of people don't care about that kind of stuff. They just want, you know, basic stuff, auto lights, rear parking sensors, things like that. You know, you get that in these. And this car was about 3,800 quid. Yeah, it's slightly higher mileage, but it still feels modern. Oh, there's another titanium export. And you can still launch it if you wanted to. You're not going to set any world records. But yeah, it's completely fine. I'd be happy with one of these. Obviously, if I wanted one, I'd want to get maybe the GT line or something like that. But, you know, I'd be perfectly happy with this. I think most people would. what I guess I'm trying to say is don't look down upon the French cars like the Peugeots and stuff, because the 1.6 HDI and the other HDIs, they have been making for like over 20 years now. They've basically perfected them. The only problem with these is after 2015 they moved to blue HDIs, and those are technically slightly more economical, but the problem with them is I've heard the fuel tanks, well not the fuel tanks, the blue HD, the AdBlue tanks, the AdBlue tanks are known for going wrong. Not sure what, maybe a valve or something inside, I don't know, but the AdBlue tanks can go wrong and you basically have to get a whole new tank. It's over £1,000. So I think if you're going to buy one, go for one of the ones which is like a 2014 to 15 plate, either the 1.6 HDI or the 1.6 HDI, which I think is stop-start. Normal 1.6 is 90 horsepower, the HDI is 115 horsepower, and the blue HDI I believe is 120 horsepower. The 1.2 petrols, from what I've read, it's best maybe to avoid them. But in terms of a diesel, like these really are they just sip fuel. And you know, for nearly 109,000 miles, it feels completely fine. You know, my Mondeo's got 20,000 less miles than this, and my Mondeo I think's got a few more knocks and rattles than this. I mean, it's not sporty. It's not as sporty as my Mondeo, that's for sure. And I think a lot of cars in a similar class, the Ford Focus, the Volkswagen cars, they'll drive better than this for sure. This car, it does understeer a little bit, especially in the wet, and it doesn't seem like you have to do much for it to understeer, which is a bit weird considering it's so light. But yeah, the front of the car does wash out. That's a bit weird. For a diesel, the engine is not too rough either. It's not the quietest car in the world, but it's completely fine. You know, you go up to speed, you set your cruise control on. I mean, you even have a digital display telling you miles per gallon. I think it's quite neat. The problem some people might have is what I have as well in these. Unless you're very small, chances are the Peugeot iCockpit. I felt like it was designed maybe for smaller people in mind, because I don't think my missus has an issue with it, but for me, if you're like 5'10" or above that, like chances are you're gonna the steering wheel's gonna block half the dials, when really I think you're designed to look completely over the steering wheel. Sorry, I just spat. Look over the steering wheel, but the steering wheel still blocks half the dials. The other thing I don't like, the steering on this is very, very, very light, and you can't really feel anything through the steering wheel. Now, for some people, that's completely fine. For me, I do like to feel kind of what's going on. With this, you really can't. Like I said, for most people, that's not really a problem. Suspension soft. This model you have 16-inch wheels with fairly fat tyres, so the ride's pretty soft, to be fair, softer than my Mondeo. Yeah, it was just a quick overview of my thoughts. You know, I feel like for the money, you can't really go wrong. I mean, I do see these on Auto Trade with 150, 160,000 miles, and let's not forget these engines are in like the Berlingo vans, I think they're called, and other vans that Citroën and Peugeot make, and you know they're known to go on for at least a couple 100,000 miles. So the engines themselves are decent, and I don't really hear that many electrical issues with these newer Peugeots either. It just depends if you can get over the badge. I mean, I even looked at the Peugeot 308 GTIs because I thought this was such a decent car for the money. And I looked at the 308 GTIs. You know, you can get a nice one of them for about 10 grand. And that's a 1.6 petrol with 250 to 270 horsepower. I mean, that's nuts. And they're supposed to be somewhat reliable as well. So yeah, I can't say go for the 1.2 because I do hear a fair few horror stories. But the 1.6 HDIs, you know, you can go for a blue HDI if you want, but I think it's best to see if that tank has been replaced, the AdBlue tank. If not, go for a 1.6 or the 1.6E HDI. So yeah guys, that's probably all I've really got for you. Hopefully this video came out well. Hopefully you can see me or hear me right and you don't hear too many rattles, because like I said, I think the rattles are coming from over where the camera is. Can't wait to open a window because it's getting very hot in here.